Tonight, WWE presents WrestleMania Backlash from inside the WWE Thunderdome, inside the Youngling Center in Tampa Bay, Florida. And the main event for tonight's show is a very interesting main event indeed. It's for the Universal Championship. It's the match we're going to be previewing in this video. It's Roman Reigns defending the Universal Championship against Cesaro. And it's a big deal for the Swiss Superman, of course, because this is the first time that Cesaro has ever had a main event World Championship match in his WWE career. He has been on the WWE roster for 10 years at this point. Something like that, right? When did he make his WWE debut? Was it 2011? I feel like it was 2011, 2012, 2013. It might be 2013. I can't remember. That's how long Cesaro has been around for. He's been around for a very long time, and finally he is in a main event position on a pay-per-view for a World Championship. So obviously we're all very, very excited because of this. And why shouldn't we be? Cesaro, main event for a World Championship is a big deal for him. Now, unfortunately, I think it's very unlikely that Cesaro gets the victory here. I don't think anybody is expecting Cesaro to get the win. And look, if he did, legitimately, it would be, and I don't mean to, have hyperbole, and I don't mean to be speaking over the top or you're being over dramatic or anything like that. If Cesaro wins tonight and becomes the Universal Champion, Cesaro arguably would have completed maybe the biggest upset in WWE history. Honestly, it is well up there. For instance, when, say, Jinder Mahal won the WWE Championship at Backlash 2017. Not a lot of people saw it coming, but it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that he could win. He was getting a substantial push coming out of WrestleMania. It was against Randy Orton. You say, well, Randy Orton's an established star. Why wouldn't he win? But this one just feels so unlikely. I mean, this is Cesaro, who historically, hasn't been used by WWE correctly. There has certainly been a ceiling when it comes to Cesaro. It's a tag team wrestler, a mid-card wrestler at best. Everyone knows he's capable of way, way more. When it comes to Cesaro and the success or lack of that he's had in his WWE career, that's not because of Cesaro. That's not because of his ability or anything like that. That's because of one person, and that's because Vince McMahon, or maybe some of the other people, the powers that be in WWE, for whatever reason, have decided the guy's missing something. And I go back to the Steve Austin podcast. Remember those live podcasts he used to do on the WWE Network? This is predating the Broken Skull sessions, and those live podcasts, man, they were funny because they were great. They were great because they were live, and Steve Austin would ask difficult questions, and he would get into what people were talking about at that period of time. His first one was after WrestleMania 30, and he spoke about the decision to end the streak, and then the next one was with Triple H, and it was right after the Royal Rumble. It was the Monday after the Royal Rumble, where Roman Reigns won the Royal Rumble and everyone turned and they weren't happy and all that kind of stuff. So they were great. But the issue was when it came to WWE, and ultimately the reason they stopped doing them. Steve Austin can say that they stopped doing them because he was only contracted to do a certain amount and all that kind of stuff. The reason they stopped doing them is because WWE and specifically Vince McMahon were not happy, because every time they did a Steve Austin live podcast, they were newsworthy for all the wrong reasons. Whether it was Vince McMahon on the first one, he was asked about Cesaro, and Steve Austin said, "Why didn't you push Cesaro?" And Vince McMahon just said, "Oh, he's just missing something. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because he's Swiss or there's a language issue." And everyone sort of went, "What? There's a language issue? The guy can speak 5 languages. There's not a language issue at all when it comes to Cesaro." And everyone just sort of got a little bit of an insight or a peek into the warped mind of Vince McMahon when it came to that one. So that was interesting. Other ones he did one with Jon Moxley, Dean Ambrose at the time, who was the WWE champion. And it was just the most awkward and difficult and uncomfortable podcast you've ever seen in your life, because obviously Steve Austin had said something earlier on. I think it was something about about Dean Ambrose's family, and Dean Ambrose didn't know he was going to say that, and he was quite taken aback by it. And then just throughout of it, he just didn't respond very well, and it was just a complete nightmare of a podcast. And WWE weren't happy with the way that Ambrose had behaved or the way Steve Austin had behaved during that one. They did one with the Big Show, Steve Austin, where him and the Big Show are drinking during the podcast, and WWE didn't like that one. He did one with Paul Heyman, where Paul Heyman just was on the fly, said, "Oh, you should face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 32 in Dallas, Texas, inside AT&T Stadium." And then Steve Austin, being the ultimate worker that he is, went with it and said, if I had to face him, it would be in a Texas Death Match. And everyone thought, oh my God, are we going to see Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 32? Is this going to happen? There was this kind of discussion about maybe Steve Austin could come back. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Brock Lesnar, which was, of course, never the plan. It was just Austin and Heyman having some fun. And Vince McMahon and WWE went crazy because they go, no, don't say that. Don't promise something we can't deliver, which is ironic. Which is really ironic, considering they were worried about doing something that they weren't going to deliver on. They do that every Monday night with Raw. So many times they'll advertise something, it never even appears on the show, or they promise a main event and then they do a swerve. Remember after WrestleMania 35, it was going to be Seth Rollins versus Kofi Kingston, WWE Champion versus Universal Champion. It was going to be winner-take-all. It was a winner-take-all match, and they swerved and gave a tag team match. Ironically, that had Cesaro and Sheamus in it. It was the bar against those two to close out Monday Night Raw. Talk about not wanting, we don't want to promise something that we're not going to deliver. They do it all the time. So, whatever. It's a tangent. My point being is that, for whatever reason, Vince McMahon hasn't been a fan of Cesaro throughout his entire WWE career. And is that because he's missing something? I don't know. I think the point of view that Cesaro is missing something, I think is a bit of a fallacy, to be honest. And let's face it, if WWE really does want to push someone, they can make it work. They have all of the options to make it work for them. Brock Lesnar, when he came back in 2012, and he did a promo, didn't he, with John Laurinaitis. It was a contract signing between him, John Laurinaitis, and John Cena, and it was awful. Brock Lesnar had to do his own promo. He rambled on. He stumbled on his words. It was just terrible. He comes back. Vince McMahon looks at him and goes, Brock, that was awful. And Brock Lesnar says, I know, I don't do promos. And he goes, well, what should we do? And he goes, call Paul Heyman. And Paul Heyman comes back. Bobby Lashley's kind of the same. Bobby Lashley, they felt that maybe the weak point for him was the promos. So what do? They pair him up with MVP. Suddenly he's the WWE champion right now. I'm not saying it's as easy as give someone a manager, but if you're a promoter and you're a good promoter, yes, it should be within your desire to see that person, that talent, that employee, whatever you want to call them, that independent contractor, not that employee, but it should be in your desire to see that talent improve on their weaknesses. But if you know it's going to be difficult, you have options to give them a mouthpiece. You have options to do this or improve that or extenuate their positives, hide their negatives. And WWE just historically doesn't do that. If it doesn't work, they just go, we're not going to, he doesn't get it, or he's not going to ever get over. But for whatever reason, finally, Cesaro in 2020 has finally, I don't know if he's necessarily broke through the glass ceiling. I don't know. It does kind of feel like it's slightly come out of nowhere, doesn't it? That finally, after all these years of people constantly pestering Vince McMahon and WWE, got to push Cesaro, got to do something with Cesaro. Why aren't we doing anything with Cesaro? The guy's world class. He can be maybe not a WWE champion, but he can be a main eventer. He can get guys over. He can be involved in major matches. Why not? Why not have Cesaro? Why not just have him in a match like a WrestleMania Backlash against a Roman Reigns? He's not going to win, but it gets him over. It gets Reigns over. Why aren't we going to do that? And finally, for whatever reason, Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard and those in charge in WWE, they finally caved in. And the big moment for Cesaro obviously came at WrestleMania. WrestleMania Night 1. It was WrestleMania 37, Night 1. He faced off against Seth Rollins. And that whole match was built around Cesaro having his first ever singles match at WrestleMania. And Seth Rollins going into that event was saying to Cesaro that you're not good enough. You're not on my level. You're nowhere near Seth Rollins. You've never even had a singles match at WrestleMania. I've been involved in championship matches at WrestleMania. I've been a former world champion. You're not even on my level. And arguably, Seth Rollins and Cesaro had one of the matches of the weekend. Their match at WrestleMania was excellent. It really was. And the performance really from Cesaro during that match was brilliant. It really was brilliant. It was excellent. And he did the UFO on Rollins, which I hope he does that to Reigns tonight. Will he be able to do that to Roman Reigns tonight? I really don't know. I think it's one thing being able to do it on Seth Rollins, who is that kind of over-the-top, cocky heel. Roman Reigns isn't kind of like that. And let's face it, the UFO, that move, it's kind of what's super, super devastating about it. Yes, you get a bit dizzy and you lose your bearings a bit, but it's kind of a sort of showy off move, isn't it? It's a move sort of disrespecting the opponent. It's a feat of strength and to impress the crowd. It's incredibly impressive whenever he does it. Can he do that to Roman Reigns tonight? I don't know. I don't know if he can. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be great to do these swings on Roman Reigns as well. And I have no doubts because, let's face it, ever since Roman Reigns has been Universal Champion, can you name a bad Universal Championship match he has had, or just a bad match in general? Think about it. every match he has had as Universal Champion, he's always knocked it out of the park. Always. And you can't go, it's all these, he's going up against good opponents. Roman Reigns is the common denominator there. He had great matches, obviously, against his cousin, Jey Uso. Had a great match against Braun Strowman, defended that Universal Championship on SmackDown. Great matches against Kevin Owens, whether that's the TLC match at TLC, whether it's the Steel Cage match on SmackDown in December on Christmas night, whether it's the Last Man Standing match at the Royal Rumble. Obviously, he had the kind of match against Daniel Bryan at Elimination Chamber, but the match they had at Fastlane was fantastic. The match at WrestleMania between Reigns, Edge, and Daniel Bryan was certainly the match of WrestleMania 37 Night 2. Saved that night because that night wasn't very good. And it was the match of the weekend at WrestleMania, one of the better WrestleMania main events in recent history. In terms of being a live show of fans in attendance, it was superb. And then recently, the match he had against Daniel Bryan on SmackDown, that was epic as well. So Roman Reigns, just in terms of being on a roll anyway, as being one of the most compelling characters on WWE television, arguably being the best character on WWE television, arguably one of the best things in professional wrestling right now. Can you imagine that show without Roman Reigns right now? You can't. It would be such a bad show without him. Not to say that SmackDown's terrible, but it would be a real worse show without him. SmackDown is the Roman Reigns show right now. He is the best thing in WWE by a country mile. If I could think of something that's bigger than a country mile, I would, because Roman Reigns is that far head and shoulders above everyone right now. The presentation and everything they add to it just gets better. Whether it is first Paul Heyman, you add that to it, brilliant. You add Jey Uso to it, brilliant. You change the entrance gear, brilliant. He's got the gold gauntlet on his hand. He's like Thanos. He's the pro wrestling's Thanos. Then they changed the entrance music. The entrance music's brilliant. And this is the new entrance. What's their producer's name? For the life of me, I can't remember their name. But it's their new producers, which kind of haven't necessarily been hitting it out of the park. It's Def something, isn't it? It's Def Rebel? Is that it? Something like that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But their music's kind of been questionable at best. And the Roman Reigns one, obviously, they just knock it out of the park. He is the ultimate boss in WWE right now. And he is nailing it. He is nailing it. So I have no doubts in my mind. No doubts whatsoever tonight that even though we know the outcome, Roman Reigns is not losing the Universal Championship tonight. There's just no way that's happening. Honestly, if Cesaro wins, it would be the single biggest upset. I mean, it really could be in WWE history. And people will probably slaughter me for that and say stuff in the comment section, but it really would be because nobody sees this coming. Nobody sees it coming. And I know that was the tagline for Roman Reigns last year when he returned to SummerSlam, but nobody's on his level right now. But what I will expect from this one, I do expect a really good match, and I do expect some near falls. And let's face it, if Roman Reigns and Cesaro can get the WWE Universe, the fans watching at home, the fans watching virtually inside the Thunderdome, if they can get fans, just even if it's for half a second, if they can get fans to believe for just half a second that Cesaro could win the Universal Championship, whether it's a false finish, a near fall, hits the neutralizer, sharpshooter, whatever, or if it's a miscommunication with the Usos, something like that, if they make you believe for half a second, just half a second, or even less than that Cesaro could win the Universal Championship, they've done their work correctly. Because that's the hardest thing in this one. The quality of the match isn't going to ever be in question. The work rate is never going to be in question. I think they'll get lots of time. It's a 6-max show, so I think this one will be the main event. I think it could go 25, even 30 minutes. The real challenge they have here is making the audience truly believe that Cesaro could potentially win here. And I know he's hit the neutralizer on Reigns on SmackDown, and they're doing all that kind of stuff, but it's not 1998 anymore in that sense of you don't need to see Cesaro hit Roman Reigns with his finisher to make you believe if he can win it or not. You need to know the backstage politics of it. Because pro wrestling fans are smart. There isn't such a thing as a non-smart pro wrestling fan. Everyone knows the backstage ins and outs now. So the way to convince fans, I think, watching at home is you have to kind of play up the backstage politics of it, of can Cesaro actually win? Do you hear some spoilers, put out some reports, that kind of stuff. So if they can convince viewers that Cesaro could potentially win, they've done their job correctly. And that's the challenge here. And I think they're capable of doing it. Now, in terms of the outcome, as I mentioned, Roman Reigns, for me, it's obvious he's going to win here. Obvious. I mean, if they were going to switch the championship, they could have done it at WrestleMania when fans were in attendance, and it goes to the same to the WWE Championship. I don't see why you wouldn't switch the title when there were fans in attendance, and then now you do when there are no fans in attendance. That doesn't make any sense to me. I think next time we see a World Championship change, it'll probably be whenever fans are back. So whether that's Extreme Rules, SummerSlam, or just going forward after that. So I don't expect to see the Universal Championship change hands tonight. So what's the finish going to be? Well, obviously, in addition to Cesaro petitioning in, trying to get that Universal Championship match and all that kind of stuff heading into this one, the real story has been, of course, the return of Jimmy Uso on Friday Night SmackDown. Jimmy Uso's been out for over a year, tore his, is it ACL? I think it was his ACL at WrestleMania 36 in that ladder match for the SmackDown Tag Team Championship. But now he's back, and obviously he comes back into a bit of a strange situation, a different one certainly than when he left, in that Jey Uso is now firmly in line. He's fallen in line. He's acknowledged that Roman Reigns is the head of the table. And Jimmy Uso, in his credit, he said, I'm nobody's bitch. He's got the shirt on, whereas Jey Uso is the right-hand man. Jimmy Uso's got I'm nobody's bitch on his shirt. And the story is of sort of Jimmy Uso sort of looking around and going, did I miss something here? What is going on? The last time I was on WWE television was at Hell in a Cell when it was Jey Uso versus Roman Reigns, and Jey Uso was standing up to Roman Reigns at the time, and the only reason that Jey Uso lost that match, the only reason he lost that I Quit Hell in a Cell match was because Roman Reigns had locked the guillotine on Jimmy Uso, who was injured at the time, and Jey Uso was forced to quit on behalf of his brother. He said, please let him go, I quit. And Jimmy Uso's kind of returns now and saying, well, what happened to you, Jey? Why did you fall in line? This guy was humiliating you, he was treating you like garbage, he was treating you like trash. And he beat the hell out of you, and he beat the hell out of me, and now suddenly things are fine. So Jimmy Uso's kind of refusing to fall in line. That's the story on SmackDown so far. Now, personally, and I might be wrong here, it feels very apparent, doesn't it, that Jimmy Uso will play into the finish here, I think. Now, I think that's a credit to Cesaro, because realistically, you would think, well, why should Reigns have any issue? Surely it should be a competitive match, but Reigns should beat Cesaro relatively cleanly. That would be the right thing, but that just hasn't been the case. In all of Reigns' matches, the one complaint you could say that the matches have been great, but people have complained about the finish in the sense that the majority of Reigns' finishes in his Universal Championship matches involve the Usos coming in, or Jey Uso, or Paul Heyman getting involved. Whether it's Jey Uso shoving Kevin Owens off a ladder at TLC, or at the Last Man Standing, Paul Heyman handcuffing or helping Roman Reigns get out the handcuff, or at WrestleMania, Jey Uso coming back out, getting hit with a concerto, but it gives Reigns time, all that kind of stuff. That's been the big complaint, hasn't it? But I think that'll be the same here, because that's the heat. The issue that they have with Roman Reigns is that whilst being a heel obviously is much more natural for him and it's a much greater presentation, the one issue that it is that everyone thinks it's badass. Everyone thinks it's cool. Roman Reigns is a cool heel. The issue with that is that if you're a cool heel, you get cheered, which is not what you're meant to do as a heel. You're meant to try and get booed. So the way to get the heat on Roman Reigns eventually is to have these kind of screwy finishes that the fans don't like, because that does actually get the heat on Roman Reigns. So I think that's going to be the outcome. The story here is that Cesaro finally is getting the opportunity. After all of these years, he's finally getting an opportunity at the World Championship. He's finally in a main event of a pay-per-view for the World Heavyweight Championship, and he's going to get screwed. When it looks like he's going to do the unthinkable and the impossible, he's going to defeat Roman Reigns. That's when Jey Uso comes out. Maybe Cesaro actually manages to thwart him, hits the neutralizer on Jey Uso, then he hits the neutralizer on Roman Reigns, and everyone's thinking, he's done it. He's neutralized the Uso, which has been costing everyone else the championship. He's neutralized Roman Reigns. All he's got to do is do the cover, and that's it. And then wouldn't you know it, Jimmy Uso comes out and he attacks Cesaro. Or maybe Jimmy Uso comes out and he attacks Jey Uso, or it looks like he's going to help Cesaro, all that kind of stuff. But in reality, Jimmy Uso then actually reveals that he's done the same thing that his brother did. He's gone on the same journey that his brother did, in the sense that initially he didn't like it, and initially he did resist to Roman Reigns calling himself the head of the table and saying that people had to acknowledge him. Initially he did resist all of that, but just like his brother, he realized eventually, you know what, I can't resist this. He is right. He is the head of the table. I am going to acknowledge him as my tribal chief, and we're going to go on to success, and we're going to go on to greater success than we've had before, because Jimmy Uso isn't going to stay a babyface forever. He's going to turn heel. He's going to team up with his brother. The Usos are going to win the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, and then you're going to have the family being the Universal Champion and the Tag Team Champions. That's how this one is going to play out into the summer. So I think Roman Reigns wins. I think Jimmy Uso plays into the finish, possibly costing Cesaro the match. Either way, Roman Reigns is leaving Backlash, WrestleMania Backlash, and the Thunderdome tonight, the Universal Champion. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Roman Reigns versus Cesaro tonight for the Universal Championship at WrestleMania Backlash? Let me know your thoughts and predictions in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Reminder, we are going live for a WrestleMania Backlash watch along tonight, so be sure to subscribe. Bottom right hand corner, click the notification bell. You'll be notified when we go live for the WrestleMania Backlash watch along tonight, as well as the WrestleMania Backlash post-show reaction stream where we break everything down. It's not much of a review, it's more of just a forum for people to share their opinions, give thoughts, a load of fun interacting with the live comments. So be sure to subscribe. Bottom right hand corner, click the notification bell. You'll be notified when we go live tonight, so you can voice your opinion and get involved with the Wrestle News 365 community. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.